Hey there, I'm Jackie Ferris. They are a dynasty in the American art world. The Wyeth Hurd family has created generation after generation after generation of acclaimed artists. We are here at the Sommerville Manning Gallery to talk about this incredibly talented family. I hope you're hungry. The 302 is serving up a feast for the eyes. You can't mention great names in the art world without talking about the Wyeth and Hurd families. We are at the Sommerville Manning Gallery, sort of a pop-up version of the gallery, to talk a little bit about this prolific family in the art world. I'm joined by Rebecca Moore. You are the director of the gallery, is that right?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about this family. I mean, it starts with this really prolific gentleman, N.C. Wyeth. He started it all with illustrations.
Yes.
Talk to us a little bit about him.
So I think you have to start really to understand how major illustration was back then. So we didn't have film, TV, anything like that. So N.C. Wyeth was really the Steven Spielberg of his day. So certain publishers, magazines, books would seek out N.C. Wyeth and bid for him to be on their cover because he knew, the publishers knew, that if they got N.C. Wyeth on their cover, they'd sell more copies. And so he's most well known for his collection of like boys' adventure books with the Scribner classic books. So that's Robin Hood,
Treasure Island.
Treasure Island, thank you, Last of the Mohicans, things like that. And he really started when he started studying with Howard Pyle in Chadds Ford, and that kind of slingshotted his career. And obviously, since then, he's become one of the biggest names in illustration, along with Norman Rockwell. And so he really created this unit in Chadds Ford, Pennsylvania, which really started the entire family dynasty.
So he studied under Howard Pyle, as did other artists like Frank Schoonover.
Yes.
So this was really kind of like a melting pot of artists that would really come into their own through the illustration age.
Absolutely, and that's what made Chadds Ford and Wilmington. So Howard Pyle's school, it all kind of revolved around Wilmington actually, and then he started a summer school in Chadds Ford, and that's where he, NC, really fell in love with the landscape of Chadds Ford. He would write these beautiful letters to his mother describing the landscape and his love for it in such a poetic way. It's really fantastic. And so other than his illustration, he actually was a really beautiful, what I consider an easel painter. And so that's with still lifes and landscapes. And so he's most well known for the illustration, but really he always wanted to be a fine artist, which included landscapes and still lifes, whereas illustration, not to jog it down or anything, but was a job for him.
Yeah, it paid the bills.
Exactly. I mean, he took his check for Treasure Island, and that's what he bought and built his property on in Chadds Ford. So we have to thank the publishers of Treasure Island for that, for sure.
And that was really a sore spot for him because he kind of felt like while he was wildly successful, he did a lot of commercial work, right? He felt like maybe the other artists looked down on him in some way, or maybe he didn't fulfill his potential.
Yeah, because I think that up until pretty much the 90s, I would say that illustration was looked at on a different level than quote unquote fine art. And so while he was painting to pay the bills with illustration, he wanted to do these landscapes and still lifes and really looked up to like the New Hope Impressionist school and things like that. And the Wyeth family in general, they didn't so much look outside of their area for inspiration. It was really into their home base and in Chadds Ford, but they didn't live in a vacuum. And so NC would have known of the New Hope Impressionists, and that really influenced his work.
He was also very influential on another generation of artists. Can you talk a little bit about how he, brought artists under his wing and kind of talk to them a little bit about the things that maybe he wasn't putting into practice, but wish that he were, had he been a fine artist?
Well, so for instance, Peter Hurd, and he came to study with N.C. Wyeth. That's how he came to the area. And actually, Peter Hurd is the one that taught Andrew how to paint in tempera. So without NC, without Peter and all of that, we wouldn't even have Andrew Wyeth as we know it. But yeah, NC is a huge inspiration for a lot of artists. Even today, even in film, NC Wyeth really influenced a lot of people. So I mean, not only just the film adaptations of these Scribner's books that he's done over the years, but the way he composed his paintings and everything. How I mentioned before, like he was the Steven Spielberg of his time, that imagery still even influences some film to this day. And Andrew, his work influenced a lot of film as well. So the influence of these artists goes even beyond their medium.
So is it just the skill or just the imagination that went into it? Because a lot of the Treasure Island illustrations, there's the garb and the action and the character that you see in the pirates and the soldiers and things like that. There's a lot of power in those illustrations.
Absolutely. And so the power, but what NC did so beautifully is he had a different technique in a way. So he would read the book, and he would try to illustrate moments throughout the book that were not spelled out so simply. So he would love to create an illustration for that in-between moment. So if the story said, he drew back his bow and arrow and struck the, soldier, he wouldn't paint the moment he was drawing back. He wouldn't paint the moment the soldier was hit. It's that in-between moment where there's a little bit more tension and a little bit more story to be told that wasn't given by the writer. And I think that was NC's kind of way of just adding to the story a little bit.
So we're going to talk more about the Wyeth and the Hurd families when we return.
My name is Nick. I am from Delaware, and I get my nature and history groove on with the 302.
Welcome back. We're talking about the iconic Wyeth and Hurd families and their impact on American art. Now, Rebecca, we just talked about N.C. Wyeth, but it's his son who really made his name in the art world as a direct inspiration of his father, but yet he's so different in the way he approaches art. He wanted to be different. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. So Andrew Wyeth is considered one of the most well-known American painters. And I think, as anyone does in the shadow of their parents, you struggle at the beginning with being influenced by them, but also wanting to kind of rebel against that. So he worked really hard to not be known as N.C. Wyeth's son, but obviously still kind of using that in a way. So Andrew actually sold out his very first show at 21 years old at Macbeth Gallery in New York. And that was the first time that everyone was like, whoa, son of N.C. Wyeth he means business, And so, but NC was a huge influence to Andrew in a way of just the imagination that he instilled in Andrew. And so the family unit that he really built and allowed his children, all who were artists, to really explore their imagination, explore their techniques, completely changed Andrew Wyeth's life and his trajectory. NC's death in 1945 completely changed Andrew personally and with his work. So if you look at Andrew's work before 1945, it's loose. There's some color. I wouldn't necessarily say they were happy, but there's definitely some color involved. It's a little brighter. 1945, that all goes away. And so nothing is more evident than his painting called Winter, which is a large hill with a boy running down it. And that painting to Andrew really was a representation of his father and kind of what Andrew was processing with his death. So actually the train tracks, Kerner's train tracks that are at the base of Kerner's Hill were on that painting, and that's where N.C. Wyeth died. And so the hill itself represents this larger than life figure that N.C. was, not only physically, he was a very large, tall man, but just influentially, spiritually, all of this stuff for the family. So after 1945, there's a lot of death in Andrew's work, which sometimes makes it hard for people to grapple with. And so we, in this area, have this innate love and loyalty to Andrew Wyeth and the Wyeth family. However, he is a world-renowned artist, but other places he's not as accepted. So one of the contemporary artists that we represent, Francis DeFranzo, he actually moved out here from California just to be close to Andrew Wyeth. And all of the art school professors at the time were like, forget about Andrew Wyeth. You don't need to know Andrew Wyeth, it's fine. And he was critically not acclaimed at all. And so a lot of people have a hard time grappling with that. And over the last couple years, I mean, he's grown significantly, obviously. When MoMA bought Christina's World, I mean, it was the biggest thing to ever happen. Recently, he's had some museum retrospectives that have kind of made people rethink his work in another way, and that's been really fun to experience.
The one thing that I found interesting is that Andrew had a pattern. Mm-hmm. He became obsessed with his neighbors. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned Christina's World. Mm-hmm. The first, I guess, case of this obsession mm-hmm. was with Christina Olson and her family. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about that relationship, and of course Christina's World, for somebody who may not know of the painting or who may have an image of a painting mm-hmm. that the first look is not really what you see.
Exactly, and so it's actually a really complicated painting if you really think about it. So it's this big hill with Christina Olson's house up on the top corner, and here she is, this young woman who actually had a crippling disease. She's in this pink dress and she's crawling up the hill, kind of with her hands a little distorted. And but for Andy, I think he saw her as a really strong figure. You know, she really was limited because of her disease, but Andrew saw the strength in her, and she used to crawl down the hill every single day to get flowers and then go back up. And so this is kind of her going on her exploration. And Andrew met Christina earlier on in life because the N.C. Wyeth family, the Wyeth family, would frequent Maine all the time. So they'd go back and forth, they still to this day. And so Andrew really had two worlds. And yes, he would paint all of his neighbors, his friends. I actually was at a lecture recently with Guillermo del Toro, the film director, and he was talking about his influence of Andrew Wyeth. And he said something so beautiful. He said, Andrew was able to say it all in just a few acres and a few faces. And I thought that was so spot on, because Andrew didn't like to paint, I don't want to say pretty people, but like he liked to paint kind of the everyday person, the farm worker, the fisherman. He really believed that there was a grit and an intensity in their face and their mannerisms that deserved to be documented. And he would often paint the same subjects over and over and over again, and Christina was one of those. Another subject of his, the Kerner family. Mm-hmm. You had mentioned Kerner. Mm-hmm. I believe he was an immigrant, mm-hmm. a German mm-hmm. immigrant, and he basically documented this man, his life, mm-hmm. And his demise. Mm-hmm. And in the process, he's churning out all these paintings, but then one of the greatest scandals in the art world happens, because he's churning out all these paintings, but yet he's painting these secret paintings, mm-hmm. the Helga paintings. The Helga series.
Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so that's kind of one of the art world mysteries still to this day. There's a lot of stories of to how he pulled that off, but yes, he was doing an entire series of paintings of Helga while he was painting the Kerners. The Kerner story in general is very interesting. So Andrew was very, very into and interested in World War II, or World War I, sorry, in the German War. And so Carl was a soldier when he was in Germany. When he came over and then Andrew met him, it became this entire lifetime of obsession basically with him. And so he painted a lot of very tumultuous paintings of the Kerners in general. But yes, while he was doing this, he was painting Helga, who was a huge muse for him. And still to this day, you know, there's some stories, but we really don't know where the paintings were hidden. It happened over a very long period of time. And this is a true testament about how the Wyeth women completely changed this family. So when Andrew disclosed all these paintings to Betsy, his wife, he was, the story goes, I think, I don't know for sure, but he was ill at the time. And he wanted to show all of this to Betsy, God forbid something happened. And after, I guess, her shock, she goes, "These are the best paintings you've ever done. We have to do something with these." And, you know, Betsy named all of his paintings, not just the Helgas, everything. And so without her, I mean, it would be completely different. And so for a while, the pieces in the Helga series all stayed completely together. Over the years, they have broken up, but yeah, they're still really special pieces.
Really iconic, and there's a lot of stories behind them. I guess it'll be a while, or if ever, that we learn.
I don't know if we'll ever really know what happened in that entire situation. I do think that little things will start to come out over the years, but I don't think even a little bit has been scratched from the surface yet.
All right, now we've been talking about the Wyeth side of the family. We're going to talk about the Hurds when we return.
Hi, I'm Bill Hicks. I'm the lead interpreter here at the Lewis Maritime Museum at the Cannonball House. And as much as we like history here, we love to share it. And that's why we're sharing it on the 302.
Welcome back. Now, Rebecca, we've been talking about the Wyeth side of the family, but Peter Hurd really played a major role, not just in the family, but in the art scene. Talk to us a little bit about how prolific he was and his impact, not just with the family, but, you know, he married NC's daughter as well, who was also an amazing artist.
Yes, so Peter came from the Southwest and came out here to be with NC. And it kind of did change the trajectory of a couple members of the family. Like I mentioned, he taught Andrew how to paint in tempera, which changed his entire technique. He also fell in love with NC's daughter, Henriette. And Henriette was kind of a little bit different than the entire family to begin with. She was the only one that actually went to proper art school. And so everyone else was taught at home from NC, but she went to the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Art. And NC would put her on a train every single day to go back and forth from Philadelphia. And if you think about a young woman, I mean, in her late teens, early 20s, going back and forth like that during that time, I mean, that was pretty revolutionary. And so when Henriette and Peter got married and moved back to the Southwest, it really upset NC. Henriette was really the first of the family to kind of separate physically from the family and go somewhere else other than Chadds Ford or Maine. However, obviously Peter and Henriette built their entire family and artistic venture out there. So both of them became very well known for their Southwest subject matter. Henriette mostly in interiors and still lifes. Peter did a lot of landscapes and a lot of portrait work as well. And so it's kind of interesting to see what that separation did for their careers.
Now, Peter Hurd is from New Mexico, from the Roswell area, which is where I come from. And I just had an opportunity to visit the La Rinconada Gallery. And it's amazing when you see the landscapes and just, you know, the depth of detail and color, and just really captures the wide open spaces of New Mexico. And I guess the landscape really had a big impact, not only on him, but also on Henriette as well, because she continued to paint when she was there, right?
Absolutely, and I think that that is something that was instilled from her father, is that this general just love and appreciation of the natural landscape. And it's interesting because I find that there's a similar grittiness to the Southwest as there is in the subject matters that a lot of the Wyeth family used to paint. So I think it's only natural for her to gravitate towards certain subject matters and techniques and landscapes out there as well.
I think it's interesting, while their paintings are all different, it seems like they have the same kind of eye.
Yes.
And sometimes the subject matter translates, you know? When we're talking about, I had an opportunity to sit and chat with Michael Hurd, Peter's son, who paints at the La Rinconada Gallery, and it's amazing to see his landscapes next to his father's.
Yeah, and so it's really wonderful to see the where the family is now and kind of the offshoots of the artists that are still practicing. So like Michael, Anna B. McCoy from the Ann Wyeth and John McCoy family. And so that dynasty kind of still does exist.
It does, and you can see, you know, when you visit La Rinconada, there is a painting called Chasing Moon, which is of white sands, and it really takes your breath away that this family, no matter whether they're in New Mexico or they're in Maine or they're in Pennsylvania or they're in Delaware, they're able to really capture like a moment in time, a snapshot of a landscape that's really breathtaking.
Absolutely, and I think that they spend so much time with the land that I think there's an intimate recognition of it. So for instance, Jamie Wyeth, Andrew Wyeth's son, who's a huge artist now in his own right, I view Jamie's paintings as portraits, no matter if it's a person, an animal, a bale of hay, a cut tree stump. And so I think that is something that translates to different members of the family as well. They paint the same subject matter over and over and over again, that they have a real intimate knowledge of the landscape or the piece, and I think it just changes how they represent it in the painting.
Now you have one painting that's just really gorgeous. I think it's gladiolas and a muskrat. Is that right?
Oh, yes, irises and a possum.
Irises.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm sorry.
By Jamie. No, it's okay, I know.
It's amazing, and the texture it's so vibrant, and I know you can't touch these things, but you almost want to because it's just so...
Well, and that's what's so interesting. Jamie has always been really experimental with his medium. He's put everything from ground up pearl dust to hay to ground pumice stone all in his paint. So sometimes, yes, there is a temptation to reach out and touch them, and I think that that's a really strong aspect of Jamie's work. That painting in general is a really cool example of how the inspiration of family continues to this day. So those irises are actually his Aunt Carolyn's iris garden. Carolyn's no longer with us, but you know, the bulbs of the irises continue to come back. And so being on similar properties to this day, the inspiration of the family never really goes away.
And you could spend hours and hours and hours talking about the talent and the various subjects and everything. But the thing is, we want people to come and experience these, delights in person. So if someone wants to visit the Sommerville Manning Gallery, how do they do that?
So I would say definitely check the website to see where our current location is. We were displaced for a little bit due to Hurricane Ida into a temporary location while construction happened on our mill. But no matter which location we're in, we always have original examples by all of the Wyeth family. So you can always see NC, Andrew, or Jamie no matter when you come in.
Well, Rebecca, thank you so much. It's been absolutely fascinating.
It's been a pleasure.
And we'll be right back. For more information, you can visit SommervilleManning.com. That'll do it for this week's episode. We're going to leave you now with some beautiful shots outside the Sommerville Manning Gallery. Until next time, I'm Jackie Ferris. Tell them you saw it on the 302.